Thank you, Lee and Pam. It's an old hymn that I have some fond memories of. This psalm that we just heard, it's a psalm for. I should say before we start, I'm not Ray Lambert. Ray was unable to make it today. He's a little under the weather, or to put it in his words, he had to go out for spring training. Um, but this is the scripture he chose, and it's a psalm for troubled times, which is probably almost always appropriate because there are a lot of troubles in the world. They may be as big as a polar ice storm that shuts down the state of Texas, or they may be very small, but even those small um, troubles can really kind of vex us. Have you ever had one of these low stakes crises? I had one last week. I was, after we did the virtual coffee hour, I headed home, and my usual pattern going home is I'll drive through someplace and grab something to eat for lunch and take it home with me and sit on the sofa and eat and watch TV and try frantically to keep my cats from stealing my food. This day, I decided to do Del Taco. And I went through, ordered a couple of tacos, got to the window. They wrap them up. They do two in single wrapping, which I didn't remember that they did. But they wrapped them. They put them in the bag. They handed them to me. I put them back in the passenger seat and headed home. On the way, there was a car who cut in front of me from the other lane. Um, it wasn't a terribly frightening situation. I had time to hit the brakes, and so there was no accident. Well, not a big accident. From the corner of my eye, I saw the bag slide forward to the edge of the seat and then flip over, and the tacos fell out, somehow coming completely free of the wrapping as they did. They landed upside down, putting beef and cheese and lettuce all over the floorboards. It was not a big problem, but it had a bit of an effect on me. I was angry and frustrated, and fortunately it didn't have a really big effect on me, because when you're angry you can make bad decisions. And I did not make a bad decision like hitting my brakes or swerving so that I could try to save $4 worth of tacos and cause an accident. Those are the personal crises, and there are bigger crises too. When the doctor calls you to say he's seen your test results and he'd like you to come in to talk to him in person. Or when you get bad news from a family member, when you fall and break a hip, when you're at work and your boss tells you that they need to downsize the company. There are a lot of difficult to cope with troubles that show up in our lives. And then there are kind of trouble that in some ways are the most dangerous. And those are the theoretical troubles. It might happen in the future. This might be a problem. It's not affecting me now, but it could affect me in the future. And right now, it's got me really scared. I think we can see that in the inappropriate responses some people have made to the COVID situation. We need to be angry at all the foreigners because they might bring more of this disease here. We especially need to be angry at China, where the virus originated. Um, and even though there doesn't seem to be any substance to the idea that it's an artificially produced in a weapons lab, we uh, we can still become very inappropriately angry and take it out on people who are, even if the Chinese government were guilty, people who are absolutely innocent. There's been a spike in assaults and other hate crimes against Asian Americans over the last year. Not all, like the shooting I mentioned, does not seem to have been motivated by that, but it does seem to be motivated by fear based out of stereotypes, fear of strangers that had no real basis in life, and certainly no connection to the people who were killed. When troubles come, it's easy for us to be afraid. And when you're afraid, that leads to very bad decisions. Well, our scripture tells us the solution. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, which is good advice, but not necessarily easy to follow. How do you live fearlessly? There are people, and you can find them on social media. You can find a lot of them on YouTube. And if you have a strong heart and a strong stomach, you might watch some of their things. There are people who run with the bulls in Pamplona, and only a few of them get tossed or gored. There are people who take up risky sports, and I'm not talking about those tame, simple things like skydiving or bungee jumping. Have you seen a flying squirrel suit? If you haven't, it's got this membrane that stretches from your ankles to your wrists, and there's another one between your legs. And what you do is you jump out of an airplane or jump off a mountain wearing this thing, and you spread your arms and legs, and you glide like a flying squirrel at serious speed and just barely above the tops of the trees. It looks thrilling. It looks invigorating. It looks like it would make you feel alive because you'd be aware that you were about that close from dying. It's a sport I don't plan to take up. I don't plan to become a building hacker either. The people who figure out how to slip past the secure points in buildings and make it to the roof and make it all the way up on top of whatever spire or aerial there may be up there, and stand on one foot and take selfies. It looks very unsafe, and I don't think that sort of thing is what the psalmist is talking about when it says we shall not be afraid. There are situations where fear, at least on the level of reasonable caution, makes a whole lot of sense. That's why we drive at reasonable speeds. That's why we wear masks in a pandemic. Not because we're terrified, but because we want to take the reasonable precautions to protect ourselves and to protect others. I think that courting danger, that chasing after dangerous thrills is not what we're called to do. But I think there is a kind of fearless living we're called to. In the second century, there was a Christian. He was a lawyer in the city of Rome whose name was Minucius Felix. He was involved in Stoic philosophy, and Stoics taught that you shouldn't let fear of anything keep you from doing your duty. You shouldn't waver from doing your duty one bit. If somebody offers you a bribe to do something corrupt, you should not be tempted by that. If someone threatens to beat you up if you don't do what they want, you should not be frightened by that. You should face everything with a kind of a calm and equanimity so that you would never be turned from the path of doing what was right and what was your duty to others. He wanted to live this way, but he realized there were a lot of things that really kind of swayed him emotionally. So he figured, I need to hang out with people who are unafraid and let them teach me. So he went and he hung out with gladiators. Who better to teach you how to be fearless than guys who went out on a regular basis with a sword or a trident or a spear and fought other people in deadly combat? Gladiators had a reputation for being the toughest, the bravest, that would laugh at death. He got to know the gladiators, and he was a little disappointed. They were brave. They were able to go out there and do what they wanted to do, but a lot of their laughing at death in the face was bravado. They were pumping themselves up so that they could go out there and perform, because they were, after all, entertainers, and the crowd liked a fearless face. Underneath it all, they didn't want to die any more than anyone else did. And without that bravado pushing them forward, they were just as terrified as an ordinary person might have been. But as he hung around the arena, he did find people who had that sort of wonderful, detached calm. They were the Christians. At this point in history, at this time, Christians were sometimes arrested for their faith, because the Christian faith said you shall worship God and only God. The Romans didn't really care about them worshiping God. They didn't really care what they believed. They said, but you also have to make an offering at the altar of Caesar, and you also have to make an offering at the altar of Rome. And if you guys will just make a token gesture to show that you're good citizens, we'll let you go. But if you insist that you're not going to make an offering at these altars, the penalty is death. Christians, by and large, did not take that easy out, but continued to be defiant, even if they were facing execution, even if they were thrown into the arena where someone was ready to attack them with a sword or turn hungry lions loose on them. In fact, as they were in the arena, the Christians would often pray and sing hymns of their faith. And he thought, this is amazing. These people have in their hearts the kind of calm that the Stoics talk about. And that calm in their hearts, that peace in their hearts, lets them continue to be faithful to their God, lets them continue to be loving to their neighbors. I'm certain they're afraid, as other people are afraid. But somehow their faith lets them do what they see as right in spite of that fear, and with a calm that says they know their God is always with them. Now, he didn't believe that God always with them meant that God was going to rescue them out of the arena. Bad things happen even to the most faithful and best people. And he was very aware of that because there were Christians being executed, and God didn't jump in at the last time, at the last minute, to save them. What did happen, what they said was, even if these bad things happen to us, even if we die, we know that God is always with us. Trusting in that, we can face anything and not be afraid. When you don't let yourself be filled with fear, be overcome by fear, you don't make those bad decisions. I think being in the church for so long has sharpened my reflexes of faith so much that I was able to shake off my fear of losing $6 worth of tacos and keep my car headed straight. That's a very small thing. Our faith can also teach us to be loving to the people around us, to the strangers, to the foreigners, to the ones we suspect. Our faith can keep us good neighbors. Our faith can fill us so fully that it drives out all the paranoia, all the bigotry, all the violence, all the hate and fear that our world tries to put into us. We can find that message in our psalm. When you're confronted by fear, that one verse offers beautiful advice. Be still and know that I am God. Calm your mind. Still your heart. Breathe, knowing that the Spirit of God is the breath of life that fills us. Relax, knowing that Christ is with us through all times of crisis. Be still so that all the noises and fears and doubts in our hearts and minds do not make our decisions for us. Let God's loving presence fill you so full that there is no room for hatred or fear any longer. Be still and know that I am God.